Hey everyone, welcome back to Fluent Vibes Podcast, your daily English practice podcast. I'm Amy.
And I'm Sam. Thanks for being here today. If you're new, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our daily episodes. We post a brand new conversation on books, life lessons, English tips, and many more every single day so that you may improve your English. Usually when we approach learning something really complex, there's this expectation of heavy academic rigor.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like textbook style.
Right. It feels a lot like dissecting a frog in a high school biology class.
Oh, that is a great analogy.
You lay the specimen out on the stainless steel table, you pin down the limbs, you pull out a scalpel, and you just study the anatomy. You memorize all those Latin terms for the organs, and you walk away thinking, okay, I understand the frog.
Right. But the problem arises when you realize the frog is entirely lifeless.
Yeah.
I mean, that highly analytical approach, it works wonders for understanding static systems, right? Where you have the luxury of time to take things apart and see how they tick.
But then you step into the world of actual human communication, specifically language acquisition. And suddenly, that dissection table becomes worse than useless.
Because you aren't dealing with a dead specimen pinned to a board anymore.
Exactly. You're dealing with a living, breathing creature that is leaping around the room. You have to interact with it in real time.
Language is the ultimate dynamic target, like memorizing the anatomy of a language, all the grammar rules, the vocabulary list. That doesn't actually equip you to catch the frog.
Which brings us to today's mission. Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today, we are unpacking a piece of source material that you, our listener, provided, and it completely abandons that dissection table.
It really does. And it's uniquely fascinating because of its extreme brevity. I mean, it is short.
Very short. We're analyzing a single, highly focused excerpt from a work titled Cultivating the Habit of Fluent English Speech. And the entirety of the text that you shared with us is literally just this: how to make the habit of English speaking so that we can become fluent English speakers.
Just that one sentence. But, hidden inside that brief, unassuming sentence is a massive philosophical shift in how we approach the entire concept of mastering a language.
Oh, for sure.
It essentially tosses out the traditional textbook syllabus, right? And it replaces it with a blueprint for fundamental behavioral change.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the first word in the title of your source really sets the framework for this whole philosophy. The word is cultivating.
Right, cultivating.
It doesn't say, like, studying the habit or memorizing the habit. Cultivation is an inherently organic concept. It belongs in a garden, not a sterile laboratory.
Exactly, because cultivation implies a gradual, living process. It requires daily tending. I mean, when you cultivate a garden, you rely on consistency over intensity.
Yeah, you plant a seed, you make sure it gets sunlight, and you water it a little bit every single day.
You can't just dump 100 gallons of water on a plot of dirt on a Sunday night and expect a mature oak tree to sprout by Monday morning.
But isn't that precisely how most of us are taught to treat language learning?
Oh, 100%.
We try to cram. We sit down for like 4 hours on a weekend with this heavy grammar textbook, attempting to force the language into our brains through sheer willpower alone.
It's like studying for a history test on the French Revolution. You pull an all-nighter, cram all the dates and names into your short-term memory, you pass the exam the next morning, and then...
You forget every single detail a week later.
Exactly. Because that academic approach, it relies entirely on declarative memory.
Okay, remind us what declarative memory is.
So declarative memory is your brain's system for storing explicit facts and information. It's the knowing what.
Right.
It's processed primarily in the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex. So it's fantastic for remembering that Paris is the capital of France, or that adding ed makes a verb past tense in English.
But language in the real world isn't just declarative data, is it?
No, not at all. It is heavily procedural.
Procedural memory being the knowing how, like riding a bike or swinging a golf club.
Yes. You can't cram for a marathon the night before by running 50 miles.
You would literally die.
Right. Your muscles, your joints, your cardiovascular system, they physically have to adapt through consistent, repeated stress over time.
And language is quite literally a physical, athletic feat, isn't it?
Yeah.
Even if it's taking place on a microscopic neurological level.
Absolutely. Speaking involves muscle memory in your tongue, your lips, your vocal cords. But more importantly, it involves procedural neurological pathways firing in a fraction of a second.
Wow.
And the brain structures responsible for procedural memory, primarily the basal ganglia, they do not respond to cramming at all.
They only adapt through the daily repetition of an action. So the source frames English speaking not as a subject to be studied, but as a behavior to be habituated.
Yes, because habit is the only language the basal ganglia actually understands.
Let me push back on this a little bit, though. By calling it a quote-unquote habit, does the source risk oversimplifying the deep intellectual challenge of actually learning a new language's grammar and syntax?
It's a fair question.
I mean, mastering a new language involves navigating incredibly complex grammar, cultural nuances, irregular verbs. Treating it purely as a mechanical habit feels like it might ignore all that deep intellectual work.
I see why you'd say that, but the source isn't oversimplifying the intellect. It's prioritizing the mechanism of delivery.
The mechanism of delivery. How so?
Well, think about it. You can possess a flawless encyclopedic knowledge of English grammar. You can ace every written exam.
Sure.
But if you haven't formed the behavioral habit of accessing that information and physically articulating it in real time, all that intellectual knowledge remains permanently trapped inside your prefrontal cortex.
Ah, I see. So the habit is the bridge that allows the intellect to escape your head and actually participate in the real world.
Exactly. Without the habit, the knowledge is just theory.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. That bridge concept leads directly into the causal relationship outlined in the text.
Right, so that part.
Yeah, the listener's quote states, "How to make the habit of English speaking so that we can become fluent English speakers. Doing the action of speaking causes the outcome of fluency."
And notice the specific target there. The text does not say so that we can become accurate speakers.
Oh, that's true.
It doesn't aim for a massive vocabulary or, perfect pronunciation. It explicitly targets fluency.
Which is such a crucial distinction. The root of the word fluency comes from the Latin word for flow, like a river moving continuously.
Yes, flow is the perfect word.
So this philosophy prioritizes continuous output keeping, the river moving over, ensuring every single drop of water is perfectly clean before it's allowed to flow.
Because when you prioritize accuracy over fluency,
Right.
you destroy the flow.
You stutter, you pause.
Exactly. You silently translate sentences from your native language into English. You run them through a mental grammar checker, and only then do you allow them out of your mouth.
It's agonizing.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who has learned to drive a manual transmission car knows exactly what that mechanical stalling feels like.
Oh, the clutch. Yeah.
The sheer terror of managing the clutch pedal while merging onto a highway.
Mm-hmm.
At first, you are painfully aware of every single mechanism.
You're actively thinking, okay, push the clutch in, ease off the gas, move the stick down into second gear, slowly release the clutch, add gas.
Right. You are acutely, intellectually focused on the rules of driving. And because of that intense intellectual focus, what happens?
You stall the engine.
You stall. The car jerks forward. The ride is just agonizingly unfluent.
And cognitive psychology explains exactly why that stalling happens. Your working memory is completely overloaded.
The brain's RAM.
Yes, working memory is incredibly limited. It can only hold about 4 to 7 pieces of information at any given moment.
That's not a lot.
No, it's not. So when you're a new driver, managing the clutch, the gas, the steering wheel, and unwatching traffic consumes 100% of your brain's RAM. There is zero processing power left to, hold a conversation or listen to the radio.
And it's the exact same for language. When you're trying to speak a new language, remembering the vocabulary word, figuring out the correct verb tense, and worrying about your accent, it eats up 100% of your RAM.
And you stall out in the middle of a sentence.
But over time, the physical act of driving that manual car every single day forces the brain to offload those tasks, right?
Exactly. It moves the mechanics of shifting gears out of the limited RAM of your working memory and pushes it down into the procedural memory of the basal ganglia.
The habit takes over.
The habit takes over. And eventually, you can drive down the highway, sip a coffee, and hold a deep conversation while your foot unconsciously operates the clutch.
And that unconscious smoothness, that cognitive offloading where you aren't thinking about the mechanics anymore, that is the very definition of fluency.
Yes. And you didn't get to that smooth coffee sipping phase by rereading the car's instruction manual 50 times.
No, you had to physically grind the gears a few times to build the muscle memory.
And the source text applies that exact logic to language. The physical habit of speaking is what forces the brain to offload the grammar rules into procedural memory. The habit generates the flow.
But wait, if the goal is purely the habit of active speaking to generate flow, does the source imply that passive habits aren't enough?
Yeah.
Because a lot of language learners fall into a very comfortable trap here.
Oh, the passive immersion trap, yes.
Right. They focus on passive habits and assume they're building fluency. They listen to English podcasts on their morning commute. They watch English movies with the subtitles on. They read articles.
And they think, I'm immersing myself in the language.
Exactly. Since the goal is to build a habit to generate flow, are those passive immersion habits enough to cross that bridge into fluency?
If we look at the strict mandate of the text, passive habits are fundamentally insufficient for achieving fluency.
Insufficient.
Really?
Yeah, look at what the text says. The habit of English speaking. Listening and reading, they are essential for building comprehension. They feed the auditory and visual processing centers of your brain.
So they give you the map of the territory.
Exactly. But fluency, by definition, is a metric of output.
I love that. You cannot learn to swim by watching Olympic swimming tutorials on YouTube.
That is a perfect way to put it. You can memorize the precise angle your hand needs to enter the water for a perfect butterfly stroke. You can understand the fluid dynamics perfectly. But the second you jump into the deep end, your body will just panic and you will sink.
Because your motor cortex has never physically fired the sequence of neurons required to move your arms through the resistance of the water.
Wow. So passive input provides the pattern recognition. But active speaking habituation builds the actual neurological infrastructure required to produce those patterns on demand.
You have to physically move the water.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We move from the why fluency to the how. The ultimate question of your source material is highly practical.
Because the text is framed as a literal question, how to make the habit.
Right. It doesn't provide a 10-step instruction manual. It poses a profound challenge to you.
What's fascinating here is that it places the burden of action entirely on your shoulders. How to make the habit recognizes that a behavior won't just organically form in a vacuum.
Especially if you don't live in an immersive English-speaking environment.
Right. You cannot wait for inspiration to strike,
Well,
or for someone to just force you into a conversation.
you have to engineer your own environment.
Exactly. You have to become the architect of your daily routine. You have to construct triggers that force you into the act of speaking.
Behavioral psychology offers a really clear framework for this, doesn't it?
It does. It's often described as the cue routine reward loop.
Right. A habit doesn't just happen out of nowhere. It's triggered by a cue.
Yes. If you want to make the habit of English speaking, you have to attach it to an existing anchor in your day. This is called habit stacking.
Habit stacking. So you don't just wake up and say, I'm going to speak more English today.
No, that is far too vague. And it relies on willpower, which we know depletes over the day.
Instead, you tie the new habit to something you already do unconsciously.
Precisely. You decide, after I start my coffee maker in the morning, which is the cue, I will spend the 2 minutes it takes to brew narrating my plans for the day out loud in English.
Oh, that's brilliant. The brewing coffee triggers the speaking routine.
Or you decide, when I get in my car and put my seatbelt on, I will record a 1-minute voice memo on my phone summarizing a news article I just read.
So you deliberately manufacture these friction points where spoken English just becomes the default reaction to an everyday cue.
Yes, you make it inevitable.
But I have to bring up a crucial logistical pushback here based on this premise.
Okay, let's hear it.
If someone engineers this environment, right, and they are talking out loud to themselves in their kitchen, or they're speaking with other non-native learners online without a teacher present to correct them, aren't they just hardwiring their own grammatical mistakes? In linguistics, there is this massive fear of fossilization.
Fossilization, yes.
The idea that if you repeat an error enough times, it becomes permanently ingrained in your procedural memory. You essentially become fluently wrong.
Fluently wrong. Yes, fossilization is a deeply ingrained fear for almost all language learners, and to be fair, it is a real phenomenon.
Right. If you practice saying a phrase incorrectly 1,000 times, your basal ganglia will learn the incorrect version perfectly.
It will.
Which seems like a massive risk if the mandate is simply to make the habit of speaking at all costs. Without a guide, doesn't repeating the habit over and over just make your mistakes permanent?
It is a calculated risk, but it's a necessary one based on this philosophy, because the biggest obstacle to language acquisition is not bad grammar.
What is it?
The biggest obstacle is silence. It is the paralysis of perfectionism.
Oh, wow. The paralysis of perfectionism.
In linguistics, we talk about the affective filter. Have you heard of that?
I think so, but explain it for us.
It's the emotional variables like anxiety, self-doubt, and fear that literally block the brain from processing language.
So when your effective filter is high because you are terrified of making a mistake, your cognitive RAM is consumed by anxiety.
And you stall out, you stall the car.
Yeah,
Overcoming that effective filter has to happen before you can fine-tune the grammar.
that makes total sense. You can course correct a moving ship, but you cannot steer a parked car.
Exactly the principle at play. If you are paralyzed by the fear of fossilizing a bad habit, you remain the parked car. You never get the engine running.
By focusing relentlessly on making the habit of English speaking first, you build the momentum. You get the ship out of the harbor.
Yes, you might be slightly off course. You might use the wrong preposition or mangle a verb tense. But once you have the momentum of flow,
Once you are comfortably producing the language without the paralyzing anxiety of the effective filter.
then you finally have the cognitive bandwidth to start gently adjusting the steering wheel.
The fluency provides the momentum that makes accuracy possible to practice in real time.
Exactly. Because once the physical act of speaking is offloaded to your procedural memory, your working memory's RAM is freed up again.
Right, you have free RAM to actually listen to how native speakers use the language, notice the gap between their grammar and yours, and make adjustments on the fly.
You cannot edit a blank page. The habit of speaking produces the rough draft of your fluency.
I love that. You can always refine a rough draft, but you can do absolutely nothing with silence.
And that shifts the entire pressure of language learning. It moves away from the paralyzing demand of, I must be perfect.
To the highly achievable daily goal of, I must be vocal. It completely democratizes the process.
It places the power entirely back in the hands of the learner.
Let's synthesize the journey we've taken through your single sentence of source material. Despite its brevity, it provided a brilliant, highly concentrated blueprint for mastering a language.
It really did.
By shifting your mindset from treating English as an academic subject to be dissected to cultivating it as a daily organic behavior, you take mechanical control of your own progress.
You step out of the sterile laboratory and get your hands dirty in the garden. You stop relying on the declarative memory of the cram session and start building the procedural muscle memory of the habit loop.
So if you are listening to this right now, your path to becoming a fluent English speaker does not require some magical innate talent for linguistics.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't require a photographic memory or even an expensive tutor correcting your every move. It requires you to be the ruthless architect of your own daily routine.
You need to identify the cues in your environment, stack your habits, and build a resilient, active routine of simply opening your mouth and speaking.
You have to trust that the smooth flow of fluency will eventually follow the mechanical friction of the habit.
But as we conclude this deep dive, there is a final, provocative question hidden just beyond the edge of your source material that you should really ponder as you build this routine.
Oh, lay it on us.
Well, the source focuses heavily on the physical habit of speaking to generate flow, right? But as you engineer your environment, as you grind those gears until they become smooth and unconscious, at what point does the habit of speaking English transform into the habit of thinking in English?
Oh, wow.
Does your internal monologue, that silent, private voice inside your head, does it have to fundamentally change its operating language before your spoken fluency can truly peak?
Does the dissection table in your mind have to vanish entirely before the garden can fully bloom? That is a fascinating frontier to leave you with. Keep engineering those habits, keep prioritizing the flow over the fear, and we will catch you next time on The Deep Dive.
If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, and share with a friend who's learning English. We'll see you tomorrow with another easy conversation. Bye, everyone!